That's a good word. Well, how do I know what I'm supposed to be doing? I don't know, just dream a little. Listen to this. Romans 12. Since we have gifts that differ according to the grace, say this, we have gifts. Some of you have those. And we've been trying to help you get rid of them. Since we have gifts, since we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let each of us exercise them accordingly. If prophecy, according to the proportion of his faith. And we'll just go on. It talks about serving he who serves in his serving, he who teaches in his teaching, he who exhorts in his exhortation, he who gives liberally, he who leads diligently, and so on and so forth. What does it say? It says we have grace, and each of us have grace. Each of us have been given grace, and grace causes us to have gifts, and each of us have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us. How many of you know that you got saved by grace, and that when you came into the kingdom, that grace is the operational power of God, and when you receive grace, that there are multiple colors of grace, and grace causes you to have gifts that are different than other people's gifts. So each of you come into the kingdom, and God releases grace on you. You got saved by grace, and you operate in the kingdom by grace, and once you receive grace, grace gives you gifts. Are you with me? Grace gives you gifts, and the gifts are different because each of us have different grace on us. See what it says? It says, since we have gifts that differ according to grace. So what does grace do? Grace is the operational power of God, and it gives you gifts. And what you need to do? It says, let each of us exercise them accordingly. If prophecy, according to the proportion of his faith. It still comes back to, don't matter how gifted you are, don't matter how much grace God gives you, you still have to move by faith. What's that mean? You have to see what can't be seen. You have to move in what doesn't seem logical and reasonable. When you come into an apostleship, what is the goal of an apostleship? The obedience of faith. That you would obey what you've been called to do. You would obey, you would bring about the gifts that God's put in you, that you would employ them. How many of you know that God does not want any unemployment? Peter said, take the gifts that are in you and employ them. What does it take to employ the gifts? It takes faith to employ the gifts. That's a good word again. In Acts chapter 13, it says, while John was completing his course, he kept saying, who do you suppose that I am? Speaking of John the Baptist. Paul said this in Acts chapter 20. But I do not consider my life of any account as dear to myself, so that I may finish my course. Everybody say, finish my course. And the ministry which I received from the Lord. How many of you know that each of us have a course? Each of us have a race that we're supposed to be running. There isn't a person in this room that doesn't have a predetermined destiny that God put inside of you. A dream that only you can do, that only you can finish. And if you don't finish it, no one else can do it for you. Listen, if you don't do what you're called to do, nobody else can do it for you. You're the only person in the world that can fulfill your destiny, because God hasn't given that purpose, that destiny, to anyone else but you. I was sharing with the students this week that in Genesis chapter 4, verse 9, where Cain kills Abel, the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And the Lord said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground." Larry Randolph did a word study on this part. The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And he said the original language says something like this: The silence of Abel's gift is deafening to me. Whew. The silence of Abel's gift is deafening to me. How many of you know that you have a gift, and if you die before you fulfill your gift, that destiny that you were to fulfill was supposed to affect somebody's life, who was supposed to affect someone's life, who was supposed to affect someone's life. And how many of you know that if you don't fulfill what God's given you to do, that you have hindered someone else's destiny because you are a part of a bigger piece of a puzzle? And when you don't move out, get this, when you don't move out in faith and do what you are called to do, somebody else pays for that because God gave you a course to finish. He gave you a race to run. He gave you a dream to fulfill. And when your dream is fulfilled, somebody else will benefit from your dream. Your dream isn't for you. It's for those who God's put in your heart to touch. If you don't move out in faith, if you live in fear, if you stay in the prison of your fear, you won't be the only one who will pay for it. All the people who are supposed to be touched by you, and those people who are supposed to be touched by the people who are supposed to be touched by you, and those people who are supposed to be touched by the people who are touched by them, they will all be affected. What we do today will echo in eternity.